Okay, good morning, Alwyn. Thank you for
Good
joining us
morning.
today for this amazing session of the Chai and Books Book Club. We are extremely honored to have you here with us and discuss these amazing set of, even though we just read the first one, we are very happy to be discussing all three. So we wanted to first know that, the first book kind of came out long back, like it's been almost 5 years, if not more.
Oh
So,
gosh.
so what has changed for you since then, and and where you are today? So, like, how is it looking back, and just an overall overview?
It's so funny because Rebel of the Sands it's my first book published, but it was the sixth complete book I wrote. So, there's five terrible books that you should never see and no one should ever see before Rebel of the Sands that were practice books. And I enjoyed writing them all. I learned something from writing all of them. But of course, when I came to write Rebel, I sort of came in with the same expectation of those five previous books, but I hadn't necessarily tried to get published.
Right.
So I sort of thought, I'm writing this for me. I'm writing this. This is so fun. And then I actually was quite proud of it when I finished it. And so I decided maybe I should make an effort of this, and everything moved then quite quickly. And all of a sudden I remember it going from being like, no one will ever see this, which I think is something you do need to tell yourself in order to not be immobilized by fear of like, what will
Right.
people think? But to going, oh my God, people are going to see this. And so that was probably a big change in terms of my writing since then, because there was sort of a sort of casual freedom to writing Rebel that doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily exist when you're then under contract, which is both a positive thing and sometimes a little bit of a scary thing. The biggest change, I guess, would probably be that I write full time now, which is such a privilege. I used to
Right.
sort of squeeze in my writing on the weekend, on evenings, on trains on the way into work. I daydream about sort of my plot when I was supposed to be working instead. And now it's my full time job. So yeah, I left my job 31st of December 2015, and started being a freelancer 1st of January 2016. And Rebel of the Sands came out 2 years later. So I've been a
Right.
freelancer for 5 years. Oh, sorry, 2 years, 2 months later.
Right.
I've been a freelancer for 5 years now. It's scary that you say that. That you point out that it's been 5 years, because I still sort of think, oh, I just left my job. A little while ago. But yeah, so yeah, I do that because basically I figured out that it was so busy and such a tight schedule. I either had to give up working, writing,
Mhm.
or sleeping, and
Right.
the thing that I liked the least out of those three was working. So
I think all of us here at the club would also agree. We all are almost students or working professionals, and we all constantly have to juggle between our workday schedules and, of course, reading thick and fat books like yours and find out the time. But we are not complaining. We are not complaining at all. So before I move ahead and open the floor for everybody to to quickly come and introduce themselves and talk a little about how they felt about the book and their experiences around it, I wanted to first ask you about when you first approached the book. Like, what was the story idea? Like, how did it form, and what was the idea? Was it only one book, or did you always think of it as a sequel or a series? So just a little
yeah, absolutely.
background on that.
Yeah, of course. I was sort of just coming back around to writing fantasy. I think for when I first because I didn't have much time to read when I was a student. I know exactly how you feel. Um, and um, and then after leaving university, I started working as a bookseller in a YA bookshop again. And so I sort of went from being a teenager to not being a teenager, but still reading for teenagers again. And when I first came back, it was sort of a lot of paranormal was out. Twilight was big at the time.
Right.
The Cassandra Clare books were big at the time, and fantasy hadn't really come back as a YA thing, even though
Mhm.
that's what I love to write.
Right.
And so I was kind of just relearning
Mhm.
sort of what I reminding myself that I used to love reading fantasy when I was a teenager, and that's probably what I actually wanted to write. I didn't want to write paranormal. I didn't want to write contemporary. I didn't want to write all these other things that I wasn't necessarily as passionate about. And I don't even remember how I stumbled across this, but I was reading something online that was talking about um, it was talking about swords, and it was some person very patronizingly making the argument that women in fantasy shouldn't be the fighters because they're just too little and weak to lift the big heavy swords. Swords are heavy, and it was like a whole like patronizing thing about, you know, like, if you're going to make women fighters, they should you know, they should use light swords, or they should be seductresses instead. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm so angry about this. I was like, you're just weirdly making some argument based on like the historical weight of swords. There's a million other swords that you can use.
Right.
Also, it doesn't have to be a sword. You could be a fighter with magic. You could be a fighter, you know, like Hermione is a badass
Right.
dueler in Harry Potter.
Right.
Or a gun takes no like physical strength to wield. You know, like it's all about skill. And I sort of, this man on the internet who I do not know got angry, and I was like, well, I'm going to write a book. I didn't even say this. This is all happening in my mind. I was like, I'm going to write a book where the female sharpshooter, to make a point about it being about sort of, you know, women not being excluded from the action narrative in books. And then my first thought was, well, if she's a female sharpshooter, she's sort of like an Annie Oakley type character. I don't want to write a Western. That sounds historical. I don't want to write that. And so immediately my brain went to, oh my gosh, it should be a fantasy. So it's sort of the first sort of thought came as I was lying there of like, okay, well, how do I make this Western fantastical? How do I add magic into it? How does that work? And so that's how it came about. And I very naively did think that it would be one book when I first started writing it. I was like, this will happen, and this will happen, and then they'll do this, and this is how it'll end. And that ending is still the ending of book 3. That never changed. But I was about, an average YA book is somewhere between sort of 80 and 100,000 words. And I was already at 60,000 words, and they were still crossing the desert. Like in that scene in book 1, they were like crossing it. And I was like, it's going to be a really long book if it's one book, if they're not even at the rebel camp yet. And I'm sort of, and I'm kind of more than more than halfway through. And so I had to kind of reassess and change my plan and figure out where I wanted to cut it. And so it became, I hesitated, even when I sold it, I didn't know whether it was going to be 2 or 3 books. And I, again, very naively, I think I said to my editor, it will either be 2 books and the second one will be very long, or it'll be 3 books and the third one will be very short. And the third one is not very short. It turns out I had more to say. So things, the target changes, the target moves a little bit as you write. But yeah, I thought it was going to be a standalone fantasy very naively, but it turned out to be 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, we completely understand. And we all love, we as readers, we all love thick books, and we don't lie. So we are not complaining. Yeah. So now, I'm opening the floor up, but at the same time, I also wanted to let you know that we at this club, I always give them something which is called the task of the month, which is always something to do with the book. And this month, all of our tasks were to, kind of recreate the cover for the first book. Like if we were designing it, what would it look like?
Oh my gosh, I love that.
So every one of them came up with their own covers, which I'm just going to present to you right now.
Please.
And then each one of them can at the same time also, introduce themselves and also talk about the book.
I love
that.
So
can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah. So yeah,
that's such a fun idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the first cover that came in from Shalini.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I actually, does this mess you up if I turn my phone so I can see a little bit better?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Am I still all right?
Yeah. You're perfectly
stunning.
Fine. Shalini, would you like to share your thoughts?
Hi. So I'm Shalini. So I really loved your book. I really loved Amani. I think she's the girl which every woman wants to be. Smart mouth, sassy, very strong, determined to do what she really wants for herself. And this is one of my first desert fantasy, and I really loved it. And I loved the slow burn romance, expecting more of it. It was quite disappointing to find that it was just very little, but I'm, waiting to read the sequels as yet. And I really, really loved how you built up the world. It was absolutely stunning. So
thank you
I would
so
say
much.
I loved your book.
Oh, I so appreciate that. Thank you so much. I love writing a desert setting because I love a setting that could kill you. as much as well as the people in it. So I'm so glad you appreciated it. Thank you so much, Shalini. It's a stunning cover.
Next up is Janvi's cover. You can see it on the screen.
I love that. Oh, it's so It reminds me of Dune.
Yeah, Janvi, go ahead.
I am Janvi, and after seeing Shalini's cover, I see that I made the worst cover ever.
No, you didn't.
But I really like the book. I really like desert fantasies like We Hunt the Flame, The Kind of Poison. So I absolutely love this one too. I love the world as it's a mix of Middle East and Western. So I really love the blend and the characters. I love the characters, the romance, everything is just great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Janvi. And yeah, thank you. I think when I pitched as Wild West meets 1001 Nights. So you've hit on it right there.
Right,
So thank
right.
you.
Next up, we have Anuradha. And when I saw this, I got a little scared, at once, because it's so stunningly haunting and yet it kind of conveyed the message. What do you think?
It looks quite epic, doesn't it? It sort of gears up for sort of like,
Right.
oh, this is gonna be a big fight.
Anuradha,
Yeah, I
floor is
love
yours.
that.
Yeah, hi Alwyn. So I thought this was a very sorry attempt on my end because
No.
I don't know much of an editing and anything, but yeah, I did what I could.
No, it's I love it. Listen, I should say everyone, I did art history at university because I am such a poor artist. So I was like, I love art, but I have to study as an art historian. I'm not a good artist. So I'm impressed by anyone who even makes an attempt. So please never apologize.
Yeah. Also, I mean, just here to agree with everybody with whatever they have said. And I absolutely loved the book so much so that I couldn't stop myself at the first one, and I had to finish. And to tell you, I have read all the 3 in a single month.
In 1 month.
Oh my God, I'm so flattered. Thank you so much. No spoiler it for the rest of the book club, I suppose.
Yeah. We had to keep telling them, please don't spoil us in the meeting.
I mean, I thought the first book was so fast-paced and so nice, and when I read the second, I was like, "What? Did I think that about the first one?" And then the third, okay, I should not for others, but yeah, that's what I think. I absolutely loved it, and this is the first book after ages. Even when I was not reading about it, I was in the book. I was thinking about it. I could not just wait, finish my work for the day and go back to the book. That's how much I liked it.
That's high praise indeed. Thank you so much. I so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Shreya.
Hi, am I audible?
Hi, Shreya. Yes.
Hey, so actually, I kind of so if you see the photo with the where we have Amani, that kind of gave up like that little secret that she could control sand for me, and I kept it in the back of my head. No, this is not. That's gonna happen. And later on when that happened, it was wow. I loved it. But I have to say my favorite character was, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing the name incorrectly, but Shazad, the one who was like she badassly killed everybody. Loved her. My favorite so far.
I think a lot of people loved. You're in good company. I've heard that a few times, so I'm glad you love her. And I recognize the little bits of fan art that I've seen there before. So yeah, I'm glad you found that. Sorry for the spoiler.
No, it's okay. I was super sad when Bai died. I don't know. I'm not gonna say anything. I don't know who all have read or not, but that was very sad for me.
I'll keep that quiet. Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Urvi. And this was stunning.
That's really stark. I love that.
I love how atmospheric it is. Like it's so minimalistic.
Yeah, no, it really is very intriguing. Again, maybe it's just because I'm waiting for the movie. It seems quite Dune as well, which I'm drawing comparisons to a great book between myself very arrogantly.
Urvi, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I think I was aiming for something minimal because I absolutely did not want to give out what an assault to the senses your book was. Even when they were walking through the desert, it kept me on tenterhooks. Like I could not stop picturizing the whole thing, and it just added up to the whole experience for me. And
Oh,
one thing I'm very thankful for is you did not end the book on a cliffhanger. That could have,
yeah.
messed me up in a very big way. But I'm glad, at least, when you're looking forward to the next book, it's like, okay, there's some peace before, the next storm comes in. So
Yeah.
I'm really, really intrigued by the way you built your desert world. It's beautiful. It's very enticing to me. I'm really
Thank
thankful
you
you wrote
so
this
much.
book.
Oh, thank you so much. It's funny. So I always believe, I think I sort of believe in the Star Wars way of writing trilogies. The first one should end happily. The second
Right.
one maybe ends on a cliffhanger. So I'll warn you now for book two.
Right.
That maybe isn't quite the case as for book one. So, but thank you so much. I'm so glad you enjoyed. I always believe the first one in the trilogy should be a complete story, and then if you decide to move on to book two, then at that point I reserve the right to freeze Han Solo in carbonite Star Wars style at the end of it.
Right. This is the next one, and this is hand painted by Priya.
Oh, Priya, how beautiful. Yeah, that's
Hi. So
stunning.
this is the complete one. If you can see this.
Yeah, she's
I
showing it
can.
on.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
So I loved the book. I absolutely loved it, and thank you so much for the strong, badass female characters. And I love the romance that is not so mushy, not so quick, every kiss and everything. It's so burn, and I love slow burn romances. It was
Oh,
my first desert fantasy, and definitely the best one till now. Best one for now.
oh, thank you so much. What did you use watercolors for that, or is it oil? Oh,
Just plain watercolors. So these
Watercolor.
are the
oh,
words from the book.
that's incredible detail for watercolor. I'm so impressed.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Oh my
So
gosh! Wow.
moving on, we have Nachiket. Nachiket, the floor is yours.
Hello. Yeah, to be very honest, I've like had a bad history with desert fantasies, like
Oh
most of the
no.
people here know. So I was kind of like apprehensive when I started. I was like, will I like this? The thing is, I've had this book since 2016, like since the day
Oh,
it released, and I already have the entire trilogy, but I never picked it up. And it was like, I don't know what to say. Like the moment I started reading it, I was like so hooked. I'm like, oh my God, it was like the first time I'm actually liking a desert. Sorry, I'm gushing too much. But yeah, it was like really good. And I was like hooked. And like all the books are like the trilogy is like at the top of my TBR now. It's like I got to finish this now. I'm already like 100 pages into Traitor to the Throne. And yeah, so it's like really good. I didn't expect. And it's like, it was like fate. I don't know how to say it. It's like, I was meant to get this trilogy at some point because I've had it for 5 years and I never read it. And I kind of like
yeah.
regret it because I didn't read it for 5 years. But then now that I've actually read the first book, I'm like, wow, like mind blown. The word building is like on point. I would have loved it if there were a map in the book because the places kind of got confusing at one
Right.
point. But apart from that, like after a long time, this is like a 5-star read for me. I haven't been able to enjoy books with like my hectic schedule of late, but that's like a solid 5-star read for me, like
Oh, thank
undoubtedly.
you so much. Well, the advantage of waiting until the full trilogy is out is now you don't have to wait between books. So I have so many
Yeah, so
books
it's
that
like
have
I
sit
have
on my
all the
shelf
three
for like
here, so I can just
5 years.
like read them in
Exactly.
succession and it'll be
Yeah.
done.
And hopefully there should be a map in the front of the second one, I think, in the UK versions. They did a map in the front of the first one in the US version, but hopefully, I don't know. Actually, I don't
Oh,
know which editions go.
oh,
Sometimes
I didn't find a
editions
map
change
here. I didn't
country to.
find.
My gosh. Well,
Right.
I think it's somewhere. I wonder if it's findable online. I'm sorry about that. I thought it was in the cover, but maybe it changes country to country.
Yeah, I guess.
So yeah. I'm so bad at geography. I definitely have to draw out a map for myself. Otherwise, I'd be like, they're heading west, no east, no north, no south. So
Yeah, I was like
it should be
confused too.
somewhere.
Like, okay, Miraji is here. Amonpur. Okay, where is this? Where's Zicha? I was like, kind of like, like trying to
I
like
totally get
map it out
that.
in my head. But yeah, it was
Yeah,
like,
Yeah,
I totally
actually, I
get
just
that.
I just saw I have it here in my third one, which is
Yes, that one.
Hero at the Fall,
oh,
but I don't have it in the first two. So yeah.
yeah,
For some
it's
reason,
not
I
there
thought it
in
was
Traitor to
in.
the Throne.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it
if we
must be an
reprint more copies,
edition,
I'll
yeah,
let you
like newer or an older edition. Yeah.
that's probably the case. I think, and I
Right.
think it was in the US ones, which confused things. So hopefully that's not confusing. But thank you so much. That's so lovely. And thank you for the beautiful cover.
Yeah. This is
You're
this is
welcome.
Shahila's cover, as you can see. Shahila, the
Oh my
floor is yours.
God.
Hello.
Hi.
I absolutely love your book and I can't wait to read your other two books in this series. I have actually ordered it.
Thank you.
And my favorite character is Jin, and I can't wait to read more about him in other two books.
Oh, thank you so much, Ahila. And that's such a
You're welcome.
stunning design. I love the sort of city in the desert.
Yeah, it looks like a tarot card to me, like, the designs that you have, it's so gorgeous.
Oh my God, I can completely see that. Now you've said it.
Yeah. Next up, we have Shrishti.
Wow.
Shrishti, the floor is yours.
Hi.
Hi.
You're looking so pretty.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Firstly.
very pink this morning.
And second, I guess everyone has covered all the points which I had to say. The book was amazing. Seriously, it was very amazing. And it was full of imagination. Like if a person he can't imagine, this book will force someone to actually imagine whatever is written over there. So
Right.
everything was nice. All the characters were very nice, and I'm so glad I've got another one favorite female character in a book, and I've already ordered the second one, and I'm waiting when it will arrive and I'll read it. Seriously, I don't know. I just can't wait for
Oh,
it to
thank you
arrive.
so much.
Very nice. The book is really very nice, and everything has been said, so I won't repeat anything anymore.
Well, I am going to review myself and say your art is absolutely stunning. Did you hand paint
Thank
that?
you.
Oh, that's
Sorry?
so. Did you hand paint that? It's so
No,
striking.
it's edited.
Oh my God,
It
it's
is graphic
gorgeous.
art. Yeah, yeah.
It's really beautiful. You're very talented.
Thank
Thank you so much for lending your art to my book.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
Next
you.
up is Sridevi.
Hello.
She took inspiration from the fan arts.
Yeah, I love that piece of fan art. It's a good choice.
Actually, I'm glad you made the story into 3 books, because if it was 1 book, I would have actually thought like, why didn't you write more of the story? So yeah, 3 books are perfect.
I appreciate that.
Even I read it nonstop. Given I should have focused more on studies, but I couldn't stop reading.
Hey, there's worse things you could be doing than reading.
Yeah.
Right.
No, thank you so much.
Next up, we have Gopal. Gopal, the floor is yours.
That's gorgeous.
Gopal, well, if you covered everything that I had nothing to cover, but I have to say one thing, that I did not expect this narrative to be such dramatic with full of twists and turns, like the mystery surrounding Jin and Amani being a magical being and Prince and everything. Actually, I cannot wait to read the next installment in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the stunning cover.
Right, thank you. And this is our final one, which is absolutely breathtaking, is by Ishika.
Gorgeous. Ishika, that's gorgeous.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much. So basically, I loved your book. I have never read a desert fantasy before, and your book changed my perception completely. And the way you have, narrated and revealed all the secrets, it's so intriguing that for the last 60% of the book, I read that in one sitting. Like,
oh my gosh.
I didn't even know how the time flew. And when I completed, it was like 3 a.m. in the morning. And I was like, oh my God, I have never read a fantasy so good. And then the way you have described all those characters and the way you have, taken into perspective about this love child between a jinn and a human, the magical powers that all of them have, all of them are so unique and different. It's just absolutely stunning and so good. Thank you so much for writing.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the lovely cover. Is it? Am I allowed to ask, or would you be able to send me all these covers? They're so gorgeous.
I will. I was just about to, tell you that I can share all of these with you on your mail. And
that would be wonderful. Please.
Yeah, we had
them.
so much fun, and I did not get a chance to tell you about my experience with the book. So I read it long back. I think I read it sometime around May or June this year. And I remember tweeting to you, and you retweeted, and everything. We had like a conversation on Twitter. And then I thought that what if, if I pick this book up for the book club, because so many of us, as you would have heard, they hadn't read a desert-based fantasy. And most of them who did, like Nachiket and a couple of others, they did not had a very good experience with it. So I thought, let's just, try and see how this works out. And I went into it. And because since I'd already read the first book, I knew that even if they just read the first book and did not continue with the second and the third book, it would still be okay, because you kind of give that finishing, that wholesomeness to the first book in itself, but while at the same time also having that cliffhanger. So that was the idea. But as you saw it for yourself, I think more than 4 people ended up reading the entire series, the entire trilogy in a month. So that's just to speak that all of us loved your book, and we had such a fun time. And now just a couple of more questions that that came from all of these people, and I will put it across to you. However, before I go ahead, I just had one small request to make. That is that we are on because this is around 11 people on the meeting. This meeting might just automatically end in about next 10 minutes, because I don't have the paid version. So if you can just rejoin on the same link, then that would be cool.
Yeah, of course.
If it at all ends, yeah.
Sounds good. If we get cut off, I'll come back.
yeah, that's just
I'll
what I
keep
wanted
that in
to
mind.
say. So
absolutely.
so going forward, a lot of these people, see, I got a message, so it will end in 10 minutes. Yeah, that's okay. We will rejoin. Yeah. So a lot of us wanted to know that, you were kind of one of the first, authors to come up with it, not like desert fantasy, which became famous, like S.A. Chakraborty's City of Brass or Hamza Faiz's We Hunt the Flames. That those are all books that came out later. So how much of research went into this book, considering there's so much of Arabic and no Middle Eastern references and setting. So what was the research process like, and how was it writing it?
It's funny you mentioned that about desert books, because I guess I'm aware of that now, of it becoming sort of more of a setting. I remember one of my favorite books as a teenager was was The Blue Sword by Robin McKinley, which was a desert setting. And I just remember being so obsessed with that, because it was such a because because at the time fantasy that I was reading, you saw a lot of like walking through the forest, like Lord of the Rings type things. And so I just remember reading that and just loving the sort of the very stark different setting. And so in terms of research, what I ended up doing, again, it was one of those things of, it's funny because I didn't know it was going to be published. So it was all a bit like scattershot, like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. Not, I'm sitting down to do this research for a book that will be published. I read quite a few. There was a point where the table at Waterstones Piccadilly had a big table of travel logs. Sort of, they were kind of a lot of people who had traveled to from Europe and from America, mostly from Europe, to parts of the world that were less accessible than in sort of the 18th, 19th century. And what was always interesting was, so of course it's sort of very white and Western lens, but it was interesting because they were in a language that was readable for me, and it sort of did touch on these parts of the world before they became very kind of permeated by kind of global culture and things like that. Before we became a bit more of a planet rather than sort of individual countries, which there are pluses and minuses too, obviously. So I read a lot of those, and those were very interesting. There were some incredible sort of descriptions of the desert, of sort of standing on mountains and looking down on this sort of untouched desert, when you've come from a little village in England, and thinking, my God, and those I thought were incredibly striking. I also, this might seem obvious, I reread 1001 Nights, which I'd read as a kid. And I also read quite a few. I don't have any of my research books with me because I'm in Vancouver. But there was some interesting ones that were sort of like it was like fire spirits, the stories of the Jin, like sort of all sorts of things like that. There's a great, I want to say her name is Amina Shai, and I could be getting that wrong, who's done some great collections of stories that are called sort of like Stories from the Bazaar and Stories from the Thing, and they're like wonderful folk tales and collections that give you a sense of just how life happens, sort of thing, of like where water would come from and what the sort of everyday life, because I found that a lot of times when I read historical texts that are about history, they deal with the people at the top of the ladder. They deal with the nobility and the rich people and the people, fighting wars and things like that. And actually, what I was kind of interested in reading about were the lives of everyday people, as we escalate to the nobility and the war and things like that. So it was something I really enjoyed reading about. Yeah.
Right. Moving on, we wanted to know about Jin and Amani, of course, because as most people mentioned, they loved the romance, they loved the foreign prince. And I remember there was a conversation going on, who's the foreign prince? Who's the foreign prince? Until it was revealed who it is in the group. And sorry, in the book, not in the group. And so how did you approach that? Who's your favorite character also in that sense? What is your equation with Jin? What is the equation with, because you kind of already said about what your feelings are for Amani, so we wanted to know about Jin.
Yeah, absolutely. So the very, very first crumb of something that was that ever was Rebel was, I think it's now chapter 3, but it was just, but it was way before I had the idea for Rebel or anything like that. And I just wrote a scene, just had this idea of a girl who was working in a shop, and it was a convenience store, like with a parking lot, like a normal everyday convenience store, working in a shop, and a guy rushing in, sort of into that, and her hiding him from the police. And I wrote that scene, and I really enjoyed it. And then I realized I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know what he was hiding from. I didn't know why he was running. I didn't know why she would hide him, kind of things. And I think that's an interesting thing as an author. There's a difference between a plot and an idea. And that was just an idea. It was sort of the beginning of a scene. So that was sort of the first iteration of where Jin appeared in my mind. But I didn't really know what his deal was. And then when I started having the idea for Rebel, that kind of idea resurged and became part of the book again in a very different form. Obviously, it's not the police anymore; it's guards and things like that. So he kind of came quite organically, because I wanted him to. So I was a bit of working backwards from that scene, as I needed a way out for her. And so he was kind of a means to an end in a way, in her mind at the beginning, but also plot wise. But also I very specifically wanted him to be at least part foreign, because I wanted him to represent for her sort of what was outside of the desert. He wasn't someone from where she was from. He was someone from a world beyond what she knew, and maybe if she followed him. Something that I do a lot before sitting down to write, which is sort of important for me, is I daydream a lot about my plot. So I mentioned earlier, I wrote 5 books before Rebel. And whenever I'm working on one of those 5 books, I'm always daydreaming about the next one. I almost sort of call it like you're having an affair with the next book, like that, like I'm in a committed relationship with the book I'm writing, but I'm cheating in my mind with the sort of the sexy other idea that I'm having. So while Rebel was the other idea, I was started doing a lot of like thinking about who he would be and things like that. And so he sort of came very organically as I was thinking of who would be an interesting person to her, because if he was just a guy from the desert, she'd be like, whatever, I've met a million of you. So I wanted him to be a little bit, have a different point of view, have a different mentality, have a different set of morals and things like that than she would be used to. And so that's kind of where he came from, and then he kind of developed quite organically out of that. And of course, I don't have favorite characters. That would be like having a favorite child. But Shahzad might be my favorite character as well. I really, really love writing about her.
You can tell us. We won't tell that child.
Yeah, exactly. You can't tell them; they'll feel left out. No, I really love writing about Shahzad. I think she's one of my favorites to write. But though ironically, and this is not something this is a little bit far down the path. There's a character who, the new thing I'm writing, their grandchild of a character in Rebel, and she is one of my favorites. And her grandmother, when I was writing the Rebel trilogy, was absolutely not one of my favorites. And I'm like, how did you make such a great child? How did you turn out so amazing? So they surprise you sometimes. Yeah, but yeah, and Rebel Shahzad is probably one of my faves.
Thank you for sharing that. We all loved Shahzad as well. We had very different kinds of feeling. Of course, some people debated whether they love Shahzad more or Jin more, and of course that difference was in evidence, so it had to be there. So on that note,
Yeah.
I would ask everybody to rejoin on the same link before it cuts us off in a mid question or an
Makes
answer.
sense.
So yeah,
Sounds good.
yeah. I
All
hope
right.
that's all okay with all. Okay, we'll see you in
See you all in a
minute.
minute.
Yeah, yeah.
Bye.